Welcome back to the channel. Minima Momento is on Patreon now, where you can support the channel with as little as the price of a cup of coffee. There are higher tiers available as well. All support is much appreciated. Link will be in the description below.
I wanted to include everything in this new unit, so its dimensions are slightly larger than other workbenches. I used 2x4 lumber for the frame. I tried to choose the straightest ones possible, but not all of them were, as you will see later in the video. The length of the timber is 2.4 meters. I used this entire length, and the width of the bench will be about 1 meter with the added edge. First, I marked where the connecting timbers will be, then using the table saw I cut out half of the thickness of the timber, then the connecting pieces and the legs of the bench. I drilled pilot holes with the drill press at each connection points, as I will be using thick and long screws. Since the floor of the shed is not completely level, I will install these heavy-duty leveling feet into the outer legs. Together they will be the same height as the inner legs. Link will be in the description below. Then I screwed the inner legs to the wall. Each one is right below the connecting points. This will later help to divide the interior of the bench into sections. I placed and screwed the top of the bench to the wall while making sure that all points are level. I also screwed this leg to the wall, since I don't need to change its height. The problems with the floor are in the middle of the shed. I screwed the rest of the legs one by one to the top of the bench after checking that they were plumb. It is very important to stick out your tongue while lifting the sheet. I cut the width of the bottom shelf, which is the distance between the inner wall and the outer legs. I marked the location of the inner legs onto the shelf, then removed them using a jigsaw. I cut the shelf in half so that I could put them in place between the legs. I let gravity and other mechanical tools to do the job, then I screwed a piece of timber to the existing one to support the other half of the shelf. Now I just had to screw the shelves to the bench, easy peasy lemon squeezy. The very first thing I wanted to build in was the CNC router. I don't want to take a lot of time showing the installation. I simply added the walls of the existing enclosure to the bench and a couple of supporting pieces for the sides. I screwed the laptop shelf to the top of the enclosure and I built a shelf above it. Then I built a simple door for them. I didn't want to use any latches, so I put small magnets in the door and workbench to keep it closed. I used CA glue and with the activator it dried in seconds. It was important for me to add the edge to the bench, because I can clamp any workpiece to it, which make my work easier. After making sure the edge was level with the surface, I screwed it to the bench from the inside. With my track saw I cut the top of the bench, leaving it a little wider. It was already late to keep working with power tools, so I applied a layer of undercoat on the legs and doors and also added latches to the door of the enclosure. The next day I cut off the hanging part of the top using a router. First job, first big mistake. Never buy cheap tools, they can easily ruin your work. This cheap flush trim bit lost its bearing and bit into the top in several places, so I cut the rest with the handsaw. Since I didn't want to buy a new sheet, I had to think about a solution. I had a piece of thin timber in the workshop, fortunately it was almost as long as the bench. I screwed this to the edge, then filled the holes with wood filler. This had to be done in stages, allowing time for the wood filler to dry before adding a new layer. While I was waiting, I added a frame to the bottom of the bench and painted with a layer of undercoat. I made the last layer of wood filler a bit higher than the surface so that I could sand it to level later on. I painted the legs of the bench black so I could finally get rid of the remaining paint. The doors and the top has been painted to Manhattan grey because it sounded cool. I added a low shelf to the bottom of the next section. I will use this to store boxes and tools for now. The door of this section is a 12mm plywood, from which I cut out the area for the latches, as well as the area for the switch, which will be connected to the router table. I painted the top with the spray gun. The result was quite good, but the wall also got a dose of paint. I added knobs on the doors and put a small shelf into the big shelf so I can use its full height. With the paint dry and the nice Manhattan grey sunset on the wall, I could go ahead and install my router table. I ordered this router lift from Amazon. It seems pretty strong and sturdy for the price. After aligning it with the edge of the bench, I marked the insert plate, then the area which I will cut out completely. I wanted to leave enough room for the lift to rest securely on the bench. I drilled a couple of holes and cut out the area with a jigsaw and the marked area with the thickness of the insert plate using a router, so it will be flush with the surface. I repaired the minor mistakes with wood filler. Using my professional track guide, with my palm router I cut out a section in which I will put T-tracks. I straighten the ends of the rail with the chisel, then cut a thinner rail at the edge where I can insert or remove T-nuts. I put my miter saw onto two of these T-nuts. Now I can slide it inside the T-track and easily attach it without a clamp and push it aside when not in use. As for the last thing for this video, which is part 1 of the whole build, I will build a 2-in-1 router fence, which will also function as a support for my miter saw, so it's very important that the sides are as tall as the platform of the saw. These are most of the parts you will need to cut for the fence. The assemble was very straightforward. Now that I still have the chance, I mark the middle of the backside. This is where I will drill a hole for the shop vac connection, and I remove the screws that will be on the way. I work my way all around, screwing all sides of the fence to the base. Then I glued two supporting pieces to the middle part. This will also function as the side of the channel for dust collection. On front of the fence I marked and drilled 4 holes, but first clamped together with the body of the fence to make sure that the holes are aligned. Then I drilled wider holes to be able to hide the bolt heads under the surface of the fence. First test looked good, so I could go ahead and drill a hole into the base to be able to attach the fence to the T-track. I cut out a piece of wood and glued it to the 2 supports in the middle. This closed the channel for the dust collection. As the next step, I marked and cut the front panel in half, but I did in a way that my thinnest router wick can fit in between. I used CA glue with activator and the result is great. It was about time to test my new fancy router lift, and I was so ready for this. I wanted to make the holes wider so the front panel can slide sideways if I use larger router bits. Big mistake number 2 on its way. The front of the fence is shorter than the middle part and I forgot to support it, while the result is clearly visible. In my head I was ready to start it over when an idea came to my mind, and last option to try, I had nothing to lose at this point. Instead of using my router, I did the same job in my drill press. I turned it to the highest speed possible and drilled multiple holes, then moved it slowly side to side to remove the rest of the material. It actually worked even with the messed up hole, so I was happy not to make a new one. I removed the material from the bottom of the dust collection channel to avoid bits and pieces stuck to this piece while vacuum is on. Then I drilled a hole for the dust collection and glued an adapter into this hole. Lastly, I glued the washer to the bolts and the whole piece to the fence, so these bolts will not get loose or fall out. Off camera, I cut all of the bolts shorter with my angle grinder. I'm very happy with the result. Even with those terrible mistakes, the workbench looks great so far. If you like the video, please subscribe and feel free to follow this build. In the next part, I will build an enclosure for my Ender 3 printer and more. Any questions or suggestions, let me know in the comment section.